What if I told you that one simple, inexpensive powder could help shrink stubborn fat, build real muscle, and calm the fires of inflammation burning inside your body, all without some complicated routine or expensive program? Imagine something so well studied, so safe, and so effective that scientists keep uncovering new benefits years after it first made waves. It's not exotic. It's not locked away in some secret vault only bodybuilders know about. It's something almost anyone can use, and for those of us over 60, its effects can be nothing short of transformative. Now, I'm not here to sell you on the latest fad or some miracle cure. I'm here to talk about science, about what actually works, and about how we can use tools that have been tested again and again to stay strong, sharp, and active as we age. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most misunderstood yet powerful supplements available, creatine. We're going to break down how it works, how to take it correctly, and why just a small daily amount, somewhere between 5 and 7 grams, can make such a profound difference in your life. So let's start with the big question. Why does this even matter more as we get older? Why should you, at 65, 70, or beyond, care about a powder that's often associated with young gym goers? The answer lies in 3 fundamental challenges that almost all of us face as the years go by: rising inflammation, slowing metabolism, and declining muscle mass. These aren't just minor inconveniences. They're the foundation of fatigue, weakness, weight gain that won't budge, and recovery that takes forever. And here's the thing, creatine plays directly into all 3 of those problems. It's like flipping a biological switch that says, yes, we can still be strong. Yes, we can still recover. Yes, we can still thrive. Think about inflammation for a moment. We hear that word thrown around constantly, but what does it really mean? Inflammation is your body's natural response to injury or stress, but when it becomes chronic, when it's always simmering just below the surface, it contributes to joint pain, heart disease, cognitive decline, and a general sense of being worn down. As we age, our bodies tend to produce more of these inflammatory signals, even when we're not sick or injured. It's like having a fire alarm that won't turn off, and that constant noise wears us out. Now add to that a slowing metabolism. The number of calories your body burns at rest drops over time. Your cells don't produce energy quite as efficiently. You might notice you can't eat the way you used to without gaining weight, or that you feel tired more often even when you haven't done anything particularly strenuous. And finally, there's sarcopenia, the gradual loss of muscle mass that begins in our 30s and accelerates in our 60s and beyond. Less muscle means less strength, less balance, less independence. It means a higher risk of falls, fractures, and the loss of activities we love. So when I tell you that creatine addresses inflammation, supports metabolism, and directly builds and preserves muscle, I'm not talking about vanity. I'm talking about quality of life. I'm talking about being able to play with your grandchildren, carry your own groceries, travel without exhaustion, and maintain the freedom that comes with a body that still works well. But before we go any further, let's clear up the confusion. What exactly is creatine, and why is there so much noise and myth surrounding it? Here's the truth. Creatine is not a steroid. It's not some risky experimental powder cooked up in a lab. Creatine is a naturally occurring compound that your body already makes, primarily in your liver and kidneys, and it's stored in your muscles. Its job to help produce ATP adenosine triphosphate, which is the energy currency of every cell in your body. When your muscles contract, when your brain fires signals, when your heart beats, ATP is what powers it all. And creatine helps regenerate ATP faster, especially during short bursts of intense activity. Now, the most effective and well-researched form is something called creatine monohydrate. It's been around for decades. It's inexpensive, it's safe. And despite what some supplement companies might want you to believe, fancier forms like creatine hydrochloride or creatine ethyl ester aren't better. Study after study shows that plain old monohydrate works just as well, if not better, than these more expensive alternatives. So save your money, stick with what works. Here's something really interesting that newer research has uncovered. How you take creatine matters almost as much as taking it at all. You see, creatine is transported into your muscle cells by a specific protein called SLC6A8, and this transporter depends on sodium. That's right, salt. When you combine your creatine with just a small pinch of salt or an electrolyte drink, studies suggest your muscles can absorb between 40 and 50% more creatine compared to taking it alone. Why? Because if your sodium levels are low, the creatine doesn't get shuttled into the muscle cells as efficiently. Instead, it lingers in the space around the cells, the extracellular fluid, and that's when you might notice puffiness or water retention that some people complain about. So if you've ever felt bloated on creatine, it might not be because you're taking too much. It might be because you're not taking it with enough sodium to help your body actually use it. And there's another piece to this puzzle that's just starting to come into focus, a compound called GAA, or guanidinoacetate, which is the precursor your body uses to make creatine. Some research now suggests that combining GAA with creatine can help it cross the blood-brain barrier more effectively, which opens up a whole world of cognitive benefits we'll talk about in a bit. But for now, just know that the way you take creatine with a bit of salt, possibly with GAA, consistently every day, can dramatically change how well it works for you. So what does creatine actually do once it's inside your muscles? Let's talk about the muscle effect, because this is where things get really exciting, especially for older adults. Multiple studies, including a large review from mid-2024, looked at people under 50 who were doing resistance training. On average, those who took creatine gained about 2.5 pounds more lean muscle compared to those who trained without it. But here's the kicker, they also lost about 1.5 pounds of fat. Let me say that again. Creatine didn't just help people build muscle, it also helped them lose fat. Now, researchers are still working out exactly why this happens. It could be related to reduced inflammation, which allows fat cells to break down and burn more efficiently. It could be that having more muscle mass increases your resting metabolic rate, so you burn more calories even when you're sitting still, or it could be something else entirely. But the point is, this isn't just about looking more toned. It's about changing your body composition in a way that supports better health, better mobility, and better metabolic function. And when we look at strength gains, the data is equally impressive. An analysis from late 2023 reviewed more than 20 different studies and found that people taking creatine pushed, on average, about 10 pounds more with their upper body across various lifts and around 25 pounds more with their lower body. Now, these are averages, so your individual results will vary, but think about what that means in practical terms. If you're someone who struggles to get up from a chair, or who finds stairs exhausting, or who worries about carrying a bag of dog food from the car, even a modest increase in strength can be life-changing. What's particularly interesting is that creatine seems to have a bigger effect on the lower body than the upper body. Why? Well, it could be that the larger muscle groups in your legs, glutes, and hips have more creatine transporters, or that they simply respond better to the energy boost creatine provides. Either way, if your goal is to build stronger legs, improve your balance, or reduce your risk of falls, creatine is an incredibly powerful tool. But how much should you take? And does it matter when or how you take it? This is where the science has evolved quite a bit in recent years. For a long time, the standard recommendation was 5 grams a day. That's still a solid baseline, but newer research suggests that 7 grams might actually be closer to the sweet spot for most people, especially if your goal is to maximize muscle growth and strength. If you're focusing specifically on lower body training, say you're working on squats, lunges, leg presses, or just walking more, a consistent daily dose of around 7 grams seems to work best. Now, if you're more interested in building upper body strength, maybe you want to improve your ability to lift things overhead, carry bags, or do push-ups, there's some evidence that a loading phase might give you better results. A loading phase means taking a higher dose, around 20 grams per day, split into smaller amounts throughout the day for about 5 to 7 days. After that, you drop down to a maintenance dose of around 5 to 7 grams daily. This approach seems to saturate the creatine stores in your upper body muscles more quickly, which could explain why some people see faster gains in their chest, shoulders, and arms. But here's the reality. If you're older, your creatine transporters might not be quite as efficient as they were when you were younger. That doesn't mean creatine doesn't work for you. It just means you might need a bit more. Some experts now recommend that people over 50 consider taking anywhere from 10 to 15 grams per day, especially if they're very active or dealing with significant muscle loss. That might sound like a lot, but remember, creatine is one of the most studied and safest supplements we have. The risk is minimal, and the potential benefit is enormous. And timing? Honestly, it matters less than you might think. For years, people obsessed over whether to take creatine before or after a workout. The truth is, consistency is far more important than timing. Your muscles store creatine over time, So as long as you're taking it every day, you're building up those stores and reaping the benefits. Some people like to take it with a meal, some with a shake, some just mixed into water with a pinch of salt. Find what works for you and stick with it. Now, creatine isn't just about muscle and strength. It also has profound effects on your overall metabolism and recovery, and this is something that often gets overlooked. A major review from 2023 looked at both anaerobic exercise, things like weightlifting and sprinting, and aerobic exercise, things like walking, cycling, and swimming. And here's what surprised a lot of people. Creatine improved performance in both. You might be thinking, wait, I thought creatine was only for short, explosive movements. Why would it help with endurance? Great question. It turns out that creatine does a lot more than just regenerate ATP quickly. It reduces inflammation throughout your body. It reduces oxidative stress, which is the damage caused by free radicals. It improves something called acid buffering, which helps your muscles clear out lactic acid and other waste products that make you feel sore and fatigued. And it speeds up glycogen replenishment, which means the carbohydrates you eat get stored more efficiently in your muscles and liver, ready to fuel your next activity. All of this adds up to better recovery. And better recovery means you can do more often without feeling wiped out. Whether you're someone who lifts weights, someone who walks every morning, or someone who just wants to feel less exhausted at the end of the day, creatine can help. It's like giving your body a more efficient engine, not just more power, but smoother operation, less waste, and faster repair. And here's something else that's worth mentioning. Women might actually need more creatine than men. Now, this might seem counterintuitive, especially given all the old myths about women avoiding creatine because of fears about bulking up or retaining water. But recent research has shown that women naturally store about 10% more creatine in their muscles at baseline compared to men. However, their bodies produce somewhere between 70 and 80% less of it endogenously, that is, on their own. So women start with higher storage capacity, but they make far less creatine naturally, which means they need to get more from their diet or supplements to fill those stores. The practical takeaway? If you're a woman, consider taking about 10 to 20% more creatine than the standard recommendation. So instead of 7 grams, you might aim for 8 or 9. And if you take it with a little bit of sodium, as we talked about earlier, you'll avoid that bloated feeling and actually get the creatine where it needs to go, into your muscles, not floating around in the extracellular fluid. Now let's shift gears and talk about something that might surprise you even more, what creatine does for your brain. We've spent a lot of time talking about muscles, metabolism, and strength, but some of the most exciting research in the last few years has been about creatine's effects on cognitive function, memory, mood, and mental resilience. And honestly, for those of us who want to stay sharp as we age, this might be the most important part of the whole conversation. Your brain, just like your muscles, runs on ATP. In fact, your brain is one of the most energy-hungry organs in your body, using up to 20% of your total energy at rest. And just like your muscles, your brain stores creatine, or more specifically, a compound called phosphocreatine, which helps regenerate ATP quickly when you need to think fast, focus hard, or process complex information. When you supplement with creatine, you increase the phosphocreatine stores in your brain, and that changes the entire energy dynamics of how your brain operates. Think of it this way. Your brain normally runs on a mix of glucose and other fuels. And when demand spikes, say, when you're trying to solve a problem, remember a name, or focus on a conversation in a noisy room, your brain needs to produce ATP fast. If your phosphocreatine stores are low, that process slows down. You might feel foggy, forgetful, or mentally exhausted. But when those stores are topped up with supplementation, your brain has instant access to energy. It's like switching from a flickering light bulb to a steady, bright beam. A study from 2022 showed that just 5 grams of creatine per day significantly and markedly improved memory, especially in people over 65. We're talking about being able to recall names, dates, and details more easily, being able to follow conversations better, being able to hold on to information without feeling like it's slipping through your fingers. But it goes deeper than that. Research has also shown that creatine reduces oxidative stress in the brain, which is one of the major drivers of cognitive decline and neurodegenerative diseases. It increases the amount of oxygen that gets delivered to brain cells, which helps them function more efficiently and resist damage. and it reduces what's called brain fatigue, that heavy, tired feeling you get after a long day of thinking, reading, or focusing. If you're someone who works, volunteers, manages a household, or just wants to stay mentally engaged, creatine can help you keep up the stamina and keep that mental edge sharp. In fact, there was a study where participants took around 8 grams of creatine per day, and they reported less mental fatigue and better sustained focus throughout the day. Now, if you're going through a particularly demanding period, maybe you're traveling, managing a big project, helping care for a family member, or just dealing with a lot of stress, you might even consider bumping that dose up temporarily to 8 or even 10 grams to give your brain that extra support it needs. And here's where things get really fascinating. There was a study done in recent years where researchers took people who were seriously sleep deprived. I'm talking about the kind of exhaustion where you can barely think straight, where your judgment is off, and where you feel irritable and foggy, and they gave them around 20 grams of creatine per day for about a week. Now, that's a higher dose than most people take regularly, but the results were remarkable. These sleep-deprived participants saw their executive function, things like decision-making, problem-solving, planning, and impulse control, restored almost to normal levels. Their brains essentially came back online, and not only that, their mood improved significantly. They felt less grumpy, less overwhelmed, less like the world was closing in on them. Now, I'm not saying creatine is a substitute for good sleep. Nothing replaces rest. But if you're going through a period where sleep is hard to come by, maybe you're dealing with insomnia, or you're traveling across time zones, or you're caring for someone at night, creatine can help you weather that storm with more resilience and less cognitive damage. And that brings us to something even more profound, the connection between creatine, mood, anxiety, and depression. This is cutting-edge territory, and it's something that researchers are only just beginning to fully understand. But what we're learning is that depression and anxiety may not just be about neurotransmitters like serotonin or dopamine. They may also be about energy, specifically about the metabolic state of your brain. Think about it. Your brain needs a constant, reliable supply of energy to function. When that energy supply is disrupted, when your mitochondria aren't producing ATP efficiently, when oxidative stress is damaging cells, when inflammation is interfering with signaling your brain struggles. And that struggle can manifest as low mood, anxiety, difficulty concentrating, and a general sense of being stuck or overwhelmed. Scientists have started using advanced imaging techniques like magnetic resonance spectroscopy to actually measure creatine levels in different parts of the brain. And what they've found is striking. When creatine levels are low in the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for planning, decision-making, and emotional regulation, people are more likely to experience depression. Now, this doesn't mean that creatine is a cure for clinical depression or anxiety. These are complex conditions that often require professional treatment, therapy, medication, or a combination of approaches. But what it does suggest is that for some people, especially those dealing with low-grade, persistent feelings of sadness, stress, or worry, improving the metabolic health of the brain through creatine supplementation might offer real relief. It's like giving your brain the fuel it needs to function at its best, to process emotions more effectively, and to bounce back from stress more quickly. And honestly, when you think about all the things we do to try to stay mentally healthy, meditation, exercise, social connection, good nutrition, adding creatine to that toolkit just makes sense. It's safe, it's affordable, and it's backed by solid science. So if you've been feeling off, if your mood hasn't been what it used to be, or if you just want to give your brain every advantage you can, creatine is worth considering. But creatine's reach doesn't stop at your muscles and your brain. It goes even further into systems and functions that most of us never even think about. Let's talk about your bones. Now, for years, people assumed that creatine might help with bone density the same way it helps with muscle. The logic seems straightforward. Stronger muscles pull harder on bones, which stimulates bone growth. But when researchers actually tested this, they found something unexpected. A study from 2024 looked specifically at bone health in people taking creatine. And here's what they discovered. Creatine didn't increase bone density in the traditional sense. At first, people were disappointed. They thought, well, I guess it doesn't help bones after all. But they jumped to that conclusion too quickly. What the researchers actually found was even more interesting. Creatine influenced the bone cells, the osteoblasts and osteoclasts, to remodel and restructure the bone itself, particularly in the femur, which is your thigh bone, one of the largest and most important bones in your body. This remodeling didn't make the bones denser, but it made them more fracture resistant. It made them structurally smarter, if you will. It allowed the bones to handle more mechanical load during exercise, which then triggered further adaptation and strengthening over time. So instead of just packing more calcium into the bone, creatine was helping the bone cells respond more intelligently to the stress you put on them, building strength in a functional, dynamic way. Why does this matter? Because as we age, bone fractures, especially hip fractures, are one of the leading causes of disability and loss of independence. If creatine can help make your bones more resilient, more able to withstand a fall or a stumble, that's a huge deal. It's not just about preventing a break. It's about maintaining your freedom, your confidence, and your ability to move through the world without fear. And then there's your immune system. This is another area where the research is still emerging, but what we're seeing is genuinely exciting. Your immune cells, things like neutrophils, which are a type of white blood cell that hunts down bacteria and other pathogens, need ATP to function. That might seem obvious when you think about it, but for a long time, nobody really studied whether creatine could improve immune function by boosting cellular energy. But now we know it can. A pilot study from a couple of years ago found that creatine supplementation increased ATP production in neutrophils, making them more effective at attacking and destroying harmful bacteria. It also reduced pro-inflammatory mediators throughout the body, which means your immune system wasn't just stronger, it was also more balanced. It could fight off threats without creating excess inflammation that damages your own tissues. Again, this doesn't mean creatine is going to prevent you from ever getting sick, but it does suggest that it can help your body respond more effectively when you are exposed to a virus, bacteria, or other stressor. And in a world where infections can be particularly dangerous for older adults, any safe, evidence-based tool that supports immune resilience is worth paying attention to. So let's take a breath here and just appreciate how far-reaching creatine's effects are. We're talking about muscle growth, fat loss, strength gains, better recovery, enhanced brain function, improved mood, stronger bones, and a more effective immune system. All from one simple, inexpensive powder that you can buy at almost any store. But I know what some of you might be thinking. You've heard stories, you've seen headlines. Maybe a friend told you that creatine causes hair loss, or damages your kidneys, or messes with your liver. So let's talk about the myths, because this is where a lot of fear and confusion comes from, and I want to put those concerns to rest once and for all. First, hair loss. This one has been circulating for years, and it all stems from one small study where researchers thought they saw an increase in a hormone called DHT, dihydrotestosterone, which is associated with male pattern baldness. But here's the thing. Multiple larger, more rigorous studies have since looked at this question, and they've found no connection whatsoever. One randomized controlled trial that lasted around 12 weeks measured DHT levels, testosterone levels, DHT to testosterone ratios, and even directly examined hair follicles and follicle density. The result? Zero change, no hair loss, no thinning, nothing. So if you've been avoiding creatine because you're worried about your hair, you can put that fear to bed. It's simply not supported by the evidence. Next, kidney health. This is a big one because creatine does increase a compound in your blood called creatinine, which is a byproduct of creatine metabolism. Doctors often use creatinine levels to assess kidney function. So when people see their creatinine go up after taking creatine, they panic. But here's what the research shows, that increase is a perfectly normal response to supplementation. It doesn't indicate kidney damage or stress. In fact, studies looking at people who take even very high doses of creatine, well above the typical range, have found no evidence of harm to the kidneys in healthy individuals. Now, if you already have kidney disease or impaired kidney function, that's a different story. You should absolutely talk to your doctor before taking creatine or any supplement. But for the vast majority of people, creatine is completely safe for the kidneys. What about the liver? There was a single rat study, yes, a rat study where they gave the animals an absurdly high dose of creatine, far beyond anything a human would take, and didn't have them exercise at all. And in that very specific, unrealistic scenario, they saw some changes in liver enzymes. People latched onto that and ran with it. But when you look at the human data, hundreds of studies, thousands of participants, doses ranging from low to very high. There's no evidence of liver damage or dysfunction. You'd have to take truly extreme amounts, far beyond any reasonable dose, to even begin to approach the levels used in that rat study. So no, creatine does not harm your liver. Now, what about cramping and dehydration? This is one myth that does have a grain of plausibility to it. Some people do report muscle cramps or feeling dehydrated when they take creatine. But here's the key. It's not the creatine itself that's causing the problem. It's usually inadequate hydration or low electrolyte levels. Remember, creatine pulls water into your muscle cells. If you're not drinking enough water, or if your sodium and potassium levels are low, that can throw off your body's fluid balance and lead to cramps. The solution? Simple. Drink plenty of water throughout the day. Take your creatine with a pinch of salt or a quality electrolyte drink. Make sure you're getting enough minerals in your diet. When you do that, the cramping and dehydration issues almost always disappear. So let's recap the myth busting. No hair loss, no kidney damage, no liver issues, and cramping is easily preventable. Creatine is one of the most studied, most thoroughly tested, and safest supplements in existence. Thousands of studies over decades have confirmed this again and again. You can take it with confidence. All right, now let's bring this all together into something practical. How should you actually use creatine? What's the smart, effective, sustainable way to make this part of your routine, especially if you're over 60? First, the form. Stick with creatine monohydrate. It's the gold standard. It's been tested more than any other form. It's the most affordable, and it works. Don't get distracted by fancy marketing about micronized creatine, buffered creatine, or any other variation. Save your money. Second, the amount. For general health, muscle maintenance, and overall vitality, aim for somewhere between 5 and 7 grams per day. If you're particularly focused on brain health, consider bumping that up to around 8 to 10 grams. If you're older, very active, or dealing with significant muscle loss, 10 to 15 grams might be more appropriate. And if you're going through a period of intense physical or mental demand, lots of exercise, poor sleep, high stress, you can temporarily increase your dose to 15 or even 20 grams for a week or so, then return to a maintenance level. Third, consistency. This is crucial. Creatine works by building up stores in your muscles and brain over time. You're not taking it for an immediate energy boost like caffeine. You're taking it every single day to keep those stores full so that when your body needs that quick burst of ATP, it's there. So find a time that works for you, morning with breakfast, afternoon with a snack, evening with dinner, and stick with it. Fourth, absorption. Take your creatine with a small pinch of salt or an electrolyte supplement. This enhances the sodium-dependent transport into your cells and reduces the risk of water retention or puffiness. You can also take it with a bit of carbohydrate, like a piece of fruit or a small amount of juice, which can further aid absorption, though this is less critical than the sodium. Fifth, duration. Creatine is safe for long-term use. We're talking years. There's no need to cycle on and off, no need to take breaks. Just keep it as part of your daily routine, like a multivitamin or fish oil. And if you're curious about GAA, that precursor compound I mentioned earlier, look for supplements that combine GAA with creatine, especially if your primary goal is cognitive support. The research on this combination is still emerging, but it looks promising for enhancing brain benefits. Now, let's zoom out for a moment and talk about why all of this matters on a deeper level. Because yes, we've covered a lot of science, a lot of data, a lot of practical tips, but at the end of the day, this isn't just about numbers on a scale or weights in a gym. It's about how you feel. It's about what you can do. It's about the life you want to live. Muscle mass is one of the strongest predictors of longevity. The more muscle you have, the better your metabolic health, the lower your risk of chronic disease, and the longer you're likely to live independently. Cognitive resilience is key to maintaining relationships, staying engaged, continuing to learn and grow. And inflammation is at the root of so many age-related conditions: heart disease, diabetes, arthritis, dementia. Creatine works at the intersection of all three. It builds muscle, it fuels the brain, and it reduces inflammation. It's not a magic pill. There's no such thing. But it is a powerful, evidence-backed tool that can help you stay strong, sharp, and active for decades to come. And here's what I want you to understand. You have more control than you think. Aging doesn't mean giving up, slowing down, or accepting decline as inevitable. Yes, our bodies change. Yes, we face new challenges. But with the right strategies, good nutrition, regular movement, quality sleep, stress management, and smart supplementation like creatine, you can age with strength, dignity, and vitality. I've spent years reading, research, talking to experts, experimenting on myself, and sharing what I learn with people just like you. And if there's one supplement I'd recommend to almost everyone over 60, it's creatine. The evidence is overwhelming. The safety profile is excellent. The benefits touch nearly every system in your body, and the cost is minimal. So here's what I want you to do. If this information has been valuable, if it's given you clarity, if it's answered questions you've had or sparked new possibilities for how you approach your health, take a moment right now and like this video. That simple action helps more people find this information, and it tells me that what I'm doing matters to you. Next, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss future videos where we dive deep into science-backed strategies for longevity, strength, and living well at any age. I'm here every week bringing you the latest research, breaking it down in ways that are practical and actionable, and cutting through the noise and confusion that fills the internet. And finally, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me two things: your age and what your biggest fitness or health goal is for the next year. Maybe you want to build more strength so you can hike with your family. Maybe you want to feel less fatigued and more mentally sharp. Maybe you want to lose some weight and move more easily. Whatever it is, share it. Your story might inspire someone else who's watching right now, wondering if they can do it too. And I read every single comment. I'm genuinely curious about what you're working toward and how I can help. Remember, creatine builds muscle, it burns fat, it reduces inflammation, it powers your brain, it supports bone and immune health, and most importantly, it's simple and affordable. This isn't some exclusive, expensive protocol. It's accessible to almost everyone. You just need to take that first step. We've covered a lot today, from the mechanism of how creatine works, to the muscle and strength benefits, to the brain and whole body effects, to busting the myths that have held people back for too long. My hope is that you walk away from this video with confidence, with clarity, and with a practical plan you can start using today. So go grab some creatine monohydrate, start with 5 to 7 grams a day, take it with a pinch of salt, be consistent, give it a few weeks, and pay attention to how you feel, how your workouts go, how your energy levels change, how your mind feels sharper and more resilient. I think you're going to be amazed. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for caring enough about your health to seek out real information, to question the myths, and to take action. You're not just watching a video, you're investing in yourself. And that's the most important investment you can make. I'll see you in the next one. Stay strong, stay curious, and keep moving forward.